Hello friends, this is Brad Apple. I hope you're all doing well out there. Today I wanted to talk to you about Larry Rice. Larry was a friend of mine and I got to know him over the last few years of his life, probably the last 10 years of Larry's life. Although I was a fan of Larry's for much longer than that. I remember hearing him in the early 80s at least, when I knew who he was anyway. Of course I know Larry had been around and involved in the music scene a lot longer than that, but I kind of came to know Larry through Tony's music, actually, and hearing him on like the Cold on the Shoulder album, and it's like, oh, this is Tony's brother. Well, hey, I like the way he sounds. I like his singing, I like his mandolin playing, and hey, I like those songs he's writing too. So years kind of go by, and used to, in Bluegrass Unlimited magazine, they put out a talent directory every October, and they probably still do. I just haven't noticed in a while. Not currently subscribed to the magazine. But probably in 1995, I saw Larry Rice's name and number in the talent directory, and it was in Crystal River, Florida, so I knew it was the Larry Rice, and I kept that issue of the magazine. I might even wrote that number down in my address book back at that time or whatnot. But anyway, time goes on. I'd bought several of Larry's albums. In fact, if you've never heard this album right here, you're missing out. This is Larry's Hurricanes and Daydreams album. It came out on Rebel Records back in 1986. Has some great songs on it. The first song, Four Wheel Drive, is an incredible song that everybody takes amazing solos on. The personnel on the album is, of course, Larry on mandolin, guitar, and vocals. Wyatt, lead guitar and rhythm guitar. Of course, Tony Rice, lead guitar, rhythm guitar. Bill Wolf plays piano on a original song that Larry wrote called Dad's Old Coat. That's a beautiful song, by the way. Mary Chapin Carpenter adds harmony vocals on It's Hard to Run Away. Mark Schatz plays bass, Frank Poindexter dobro, Ricky Simpkins fiddle, Sammy Sheeler banjo, and Mark Johnson clawhammer banjo. But anyway, there's some great songs on this album. And another song in particular, if I had to draw attention to one song, it would be Tabasco. That's an instrumental song that Larry wrote, and they all take amazing solos on that song there. And so yeah, you need to listen to that album. Another of Larry's albums that is really great too, I believe, is this one right here, Time Machine, and it features a lot of similar personnel. This one, Larry even has some more electrified sound on some songs, like the opener, Without Mentioning Your Name. He has electric bass and has drums on there too. But he has a lot of great songs on this album right here that he wrote. So I'd been listening to Larry's music a lot. I was a big fan of him. I loved his writing. Keep the Lamp On, Sadie was one of my favorite songs of all time. That was on the Rice Brothers' first album. So, when you're a fan of somebody's music, and at that time, 1996, the first part of the year, I was 20 years old, and I decided I wanted to talk to Larry. So I got my nerve up and I picked the phone up and I dialed his number that I found in Bluegrass Unlimited. And I guess it was his wife answered the phone, and I asked for Larry Rice. And just a minute later, he came and got on the phone, and said hello to him and told him who I was, that I was a big fan of his music and whatnot. And we just kind of hit it off. I'd say we talked about an hour that first time I talked to him. And I kind of kept in contact with Larry after that through email and an occasional phone call. And he was just always so nice and generous with his time. And I was actually fortunate enough to get Larry to record with me on one of my CDs that I put out myself. This was back in 2001. It's called Mandolin Fiesta. That's the title cut. It's an instrumental song there that I wrote. Larry took a break on that song with me. He played mandolin on it with me. And he also sang a couple of songs on here. One of them being This Old Town, an original song of mine. Larry sang lead on that, and I sang harmony with him. So that was around 2000 there that happened. And the only time I actually got to see Larry play was in 2000, in June of that year. Rice, Hillman, and Peterson were playing at the Ryman at the Bluegrass nights they have over there through the summer. I guess they're still doing that. But anyway, he was playing with Rice, Hillman, and Peterson, which was the first time I got to see Chris Hillman and Herb Peterson live also. And so that was a great night. And one of the neat things about Larry, and when I called Larry, I never asked him questions about Tony or anybody else besides him because I was genuinely interested in him. I didn't call him to find out information about Tony, but he would volunteer information, that it was cool to me because I was a fan of Tony, but I would get kind of sneak peeks at some things that was going on. And for instance, the first time that I called Larry, that I talked to you about, the first night I called Larry, he was telling me that they had just recorded an album, just finished recording it, and he told me it would be him and Tony, along with Chris Hillman and Herb Peterson, and sidemen such as Ricky and Ronnie Simpkins and Jerry Douglas, and that album would be coming out. He first thought that year, which was 1996. It ended up being the following year in 97 when it actually was released. But I thought that was just awesome, that I got to hear something that not too many other people might know at the time. And then he would tell me other interesting tidbits in time as we talked further years down the road. I remember one thing Larry told me was that Tony had an idea. He wanted to do an album with the Kentucky Colonels, all of the Colonels that were still around, and include himself in the guitar role that Clarence, used to fill, of course. But Larry told me that Roland White was kind of the holdout on that Roland really didn't want to do that, which I can understand. I mean, that was his brother's role, and I'm sure that was still a tender area for Roland, and perhaps he didn't want to do an album with the Kentucky Colonels without his brother in it anymore. But I always thought it was neat, and it inspired me that Larry and Tony both always kept projects going in there. If they didn't have them going, if they weren't a physical reality right at the moment, they always had something brewing in their mind as far as a project they could be involved in musically, and a recording project that they could put together. And in fact, Larry told me one time that he would rather write songs and record them in the studio than he had play live somewhere, that he'd much rather just write songs and record them. So he did love the recording process. And one other story Larry told me was that Rounder Records was wanting a third Rice Brothers album to be done, like in 96 or 97, but I think Tony didn't want to do that one. And of course, Tony wasn't singing anymore at that time, so Larry would have had to do all the lead singing, I'm sure. But anyway, it was always neat that those guys were keeping projects going, and it was always inspiring. And I was always inspired by Larry's genuine kindness and his professionalism and just his talent. I mean, what do you say? I mean, he was a genius, I think. Just listen to some of the songs he wrote. His mandolin playing is great. He doesn't get near the credit that he deserves for his mandolin playing, and his singing is great. Just he was a wonderful talent, and I sure miss him now that he's no longer around. It's not quite the same anymore that Larry and Tony are both gone now, that there's not projects coming out with their stamp somewhere on the project, and I do miss Larry a lot. I remember the last time I talked to him was on the phone was probably maybe about 3 months before he passed away, and it was a great conversation. And I remember he was looking forward to getting back into playing music and getting back to recording and stuff. But unfortunately that didn't happen. But anyway, if you haven't listened to Larry's music, give it a listen. I think you'll find as much enjoyment in it as I have all these years. And yeah, I think you'll be inspired too. So friends, that's it for this video. And thank you again for watching and for liking, for commenting, and for subscribing. If you haven't subscribed, please do that for me. I'm trying to grow the channel all the time and make better content and everything I can to make it better for everyone that's listening out there. So thanks again, and look forward to talking to you next time. And many thanks. Much obliged to you.